That's a really good question. And it's so interesting, isn't it? Because if we were to go into a family that was having some problems with well-being and say we're just going to take care of the children and not look at what's going on with the adults, the parents, I think we'd get some quizzical looks, wouldn't we? And so I think it's really important that we're always considering that big picture. I remember reading a study by a researcher named Sue Roffey, who her study was basically looking at student and teacher wellbeing, two sides of the same coin. Nice. And she sort of found through her research how dependent one wellbeing set is on the other. And just how much, when teachers' well-being is taken care of, how that elevates not only students' well-being but their performance, their feeling of connection, their feeling of motivation, all those things. So I think it's a conversation that I'm excited that is happening more and more. Okay. But I think we can still, it's still, work in progress, definitely.
Hi everyone, welcome to our episode of From Surviving to Thriving, Reimagining Wellbeing in Schools Using Positive Education. So just a quick recap for those of you who are new here. I'm from Forte360. We are a very young NGO that kind of do upstream support work for children's well-being to develop their strengths and self-worth. So this podcast is really an initiative to really spotlight important voices that can help to shape the way we think about children's well-being in Singapore. So today's episode is something that's going to be close to our hearts at Forte360 because it will be diving deeper into positive education, which is a practice that we use in our organization. So I'm very excited and really honored to have Nicole with us here today, who is the head of positive psychology at the School of Positive Psychology. Hi, Nicole.
Hi, how are you, Divya?
I'm good. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being part of our podcast today.
Absolute pleasure.
Yeah. So maybe you can introduce yourself. Like, what do you do in the School of Positive Psychology?
What do I do? That's a good question, isn't it? So I work with the academic program. So we work with people of all ages who want to build their understanding of positive psychology and use it in coaching, in organisational settings, in education, and all sorts of ways. And so I help to make sure that the program is taken care of, running really smoothly. Nice. And I do a little bit of lecturing as well in that space too. Nice. So yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. So maybe you can share with us in your own words, what is positive education and how it contributes to children's well-being?
Yeah. So positive education, it's interesting. It's gone through quite a journey in itself. So many years ago, when conversations about positive psychology started happening and we were building up a body of science about how positive psychology can impact our well-being, a number of schools started getting curious about, well, if this is working kind of in the wider population, what could the impact be in schools? And so Martin Seligman and a small team of researchers, one of the big sort of studies that was done, he went to Melbourne in Australia and conducted a 6-month, basically he went and stayed in the school and observed for 6 months. His team stayed longer and they looked at what they could do in an educational setting. So they looked at how we could understand things like the strengths, our personal character strengths, to impact how we can live sort of a life that's more towards thriving and flourishing. So really supporting the whole child in learning. And traditionally, education's focused very much on performance, but it leaves out a big part of the equation. That's, of course, when we feel well, when we feel better, we do better in that performance as well. So kind of the balancing act there.
Yeah, nice. And thanks for sharing that. I think it also gives us a picture of like what is positive education. Yeah, so I'm just also curious, like what drew you to positive education? Because formerly you were an educator as well. Yeah, so you want to share a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So I spent about 25 years in international education, and I watched obviously many young people grow, learn, develop, and I started to notice that there were certain techniques that I was observing in sort of the reading that I was doing, just about building things like confidence to start with. My area was theatre. So confidence and emotional regulation, they're a big part of what we do in theatre work. And so I started looking at, well, what are the other things that we can do in that space? And in parallel with that, I had my own sort of practice of developing just personal well-being. And then a friend of mine, it was like all things came together at once. A good friend of mine said, oh, actually, I've just started doing some work in positive psychology or some training. And it was like a light bulb went on. I thought, oh, okay, this is something I need to be a part of. I need to start learning about. So that started my academic journey to sort of become qualified and sort of feel really confident that I had something really meaningful to offer in that space.
Okay. Yeah, I think with your experience in the schools as well as now, leading the positive psychology department as well, right? So in your perspective, like to what extent schools are practicing positive education?
I think when we come to schools, every school has at the heart of what they do, they are there to try and help children get the best out of themselves. So I think there are so many good intentions. On the other side of things, everyone is time poor, and there's so many things that get in the way, things like academic achievement and measurement scales and all these things that are really important, but often can get in the way of the amount of positive education and well-being education that happens in school. So I think most schools will have a degree of positive education happening, and it might be small things that are happening. Some of those sort of low-hanging fruits, like might be that they teach children a little bit about how to regulate their emotions, how to create sort of that safe space in themselves, or some gratitude work. So I think as we look in different schools, we'll see a whole really wide range of different practices and different levels of practice that are happening.
Yeah, I do also agree with you that you're sharing that actually every school have a degree of like how they have used positive education. So I feel it's not fair for anyone to say that none of the schools using positive education. So I think we acknowledge it definitely. But what do you feel can be the next step? When it comes to for these schools to actually promote more student well-being using positive education?
So I think I like to use the analogy of a tree. It's not my own. I borrowed it from many other people. But I mentioned the idea of the low-hanging fruit, the idea of the easy things for a teacher to pick up and take into the classroom. So those are really important. But if we think about the idea of a tree as a metaphor, we've got then the branches, kind of what are the actual practices that can be put in place that are sustainable. And these might be things like understanding how we develop meaningful relationships. How do we understand what's meaningful and purposeful to us as individuals, and outside of just our own lives, what do we do to help others? And then further down, if we think about the roots of the tree, that's when things like the leadership teams, the policies, the connections with government support, and some of that big picture happens. And so I think that's where I would love to see more and more schools shifting from the low-hanging fruit into more of the strategic areas, those branches of well-being and positive psychology, and then really getting to the root system so that it's work that's sustainable.
Yes.
It's work that has longevity. It's not just dependent on one educator having an interest and saying, oh, let me try this out with this group of children.
Yeah.
It's something that can be revisited year after year and become a part of the fabric of a school.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing is also like a whole school approach, right? And like really a mindset shift that this is something important for my kids or even for the school, for like, you know, students to thrive, right? So I think before we kind of deep dive into children's well-being, I would like to hear your perspective about teachers' well-being, right? How do you feel like teachers' well-being kind of contribute to children's well-being, and are we doing enough for the teachers actually?
It's a really good question. And it's so interesting, isn't it? Because if we were to go into a family that was having some problems with well-being and say we're just going to take care of the children and not look at what's going on with the adults, the parents, I think we'd get some quizzical looks, wouldn't we? And so I think it's really important that we're always considering that big picture. I remember reading a study by a researcher named Sue Roffey, who her study was basically looking at student and teacher well-being, two sides of the same coin.
Nice.
And so, and she sort of found through her research how dependent one well-being set is on the other.
Yeah, that's very helpful.
Yeah. And just how much, when teachers' well-being is taken care of, how that elevates not only students' well-being but their performance, their feeling of connection, their feeling of motivation, all those things. Yeah. So I think it's a conversation that I'm excited that is happening more and more.
Okay.
But I think we can still, it's still,
like a work in progress.
Work in progress, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe can you share with us some like examples where like, there's that happened maybe in a school or a classroom where when the teacher's well-being is prioritized, the children's well-being actually improved. Is there some examples that you can share?
Yeah, absolutely. I know from personal experience when going through and working with a staff body on seemingly simple things, simple in idea, difficult in practice. So we're working at on emotional regulation, okay, and just looking at how do we support teachers in stressful moments, in moments where it feels like there are perhaps 5 to 10 different little fires that are going on in different places. How do we help support teachers in that moment without removing their autonomy, without removing their sense of agency? And so I taught simple practices in breathing, in being present, in just allowing, sitting with difficult emotions. Basically, we looked at some practices there. And then the feedback that came after going through those practices, it was really interesting just seeing how the small shifts start to stack on top of each other. Because I mean, no one has a magic wand. You can't just magically make everything shift on its head from being stressful to blissful and calm, but to be able to put practices in place where you can little bit by bit see that there's just that greater sense of the balance, the calmness. Yeah, so that was the feedback that teachers were coming back with in actual practice.
Nice. It's a lot about like inner work as well, right? So it's like, even like for me personally, when I first started working with children, I didn't know what were my triggers. So like whenever some kid triggers me, I know like I'm shooting up, but like when I start to learn it through practice, I realized that, I'm getting triggered. So I need to calm down. I need to breathe. Or like I would just say, I need a timeout. I would just wait outside, So I think that's really important. And I think that's something that we hope more teachers can get as well, support, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So like, I think we talked a little bit about support structures, right? Maybe you can share with me like, what are some examples or like, of some systems or support structures that you feel that will make a biggest difference when it comes to teachers' well-being,
I think from what I've seen, across sort of many schools. I think there's a really powerful positive intention from leadership to look after teachers. And often this will come through in things like snacks at break time, or a yoga class, a meditation class, which is lovely and appreciated. I'm sure I don't want to suggest that that's not appreciated. But the things that make the difference are actually having policies in place that protect time and energy, those individual resources. So looking at how does the culture of a school work to really embrace best practice that can help both the teachers and the students thrive. And that's hard, right? Because leaders they have their own sort of challenges, I recognize, in terms of the numbers of teachers and the numbers of students and their resources. So I think it's really about having open conversations with teachers, asking them what do they need, what would help them to be at their best in order to be there for the students and see their best.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I think it's like modeling what we want to do with the kids, right? Like we want to take care of the kids, but let's first take care of ourselves and the teachers. Yeah, that's very powerful. Thanks for sharing that. So maybe you can also share with us, how do you feel like, positive education can truly make a difference in a school setting when it comes to to students who may be of challenge, or have maybe those who are from the vulnerable backgrounds, how can we support them through positive education?
I think there's something really empowering about giving children really concrete strategies. When we look at, and I've mentioned emotional regulation a couple of times, and something that I've seen work so well with children, anything from 5-year-olds up to 18-year-olds, is looking at, well, how do we regulate our emotions, for example? And especially children from vulnerable backgrounds, and whether it be that there are things going on at home that are difficult or things within themselves that are difficult, learning some skills that they feel empowered to sort of take charge of and say, right, I know when I'm in this situation, I've got something in my back pocket ready to use.
Nice.
And I think there are so many of those in positive psychology. We refer to them as PPIs, positive psychology interventions.
Okay.
So just little micro things that we can do in the moment to just help either build a greater capacity to cope with a situation that's difficult, or in a situation where things are okay to excel. Okay, because obviously, it's not just about dealing with challenges, but it's also about dealing with the time where we know we could do a bit better, and maybe we could help students elevate in those moments and feel sort of motivated there.
Yeah. It's also about like what you mentioned, increasing the psychological resilience and resources within them, right? So that they can have that tools, to keep them going. Yeah. So actually, you have worked extensively with international schools and also, with local schools as well, right? So in your perspective, how do you feel like local schools differ when it comes to implementing well-being practices?
It's interesting because I think there are different practices that I see going on, and I wouldn't want to say that one is better or worse in any way. I think it's really important that there are just different approaches, and actually, international and MOE schools or local schools can, they can learn from each other. So I want to just sort of highlight that to begin with. I think there's perhaps within the international schools, there's the capacity to change quickly, because often there is a population that will be changing, and so there'll be new and fresh ideas coming in. what that can, the sort of downside of that is that sometimes programs are not sustained in the way that perhaps in local schools where there's more consistency in staff, in the culture of the school. So perhaps it might be a little bit harder to implement something, but once it's implemented, if you've got that sense of the community behind the leadership, you're integrating it into, you know, getting buy-in from the teachers, from the students, from the parents. And it's challenging, right? But it's something that I've seen working really well, and some of my peers who've done extensive work. I've only done a little bit of work in local schools because I know there are so many experts. I support them.
Oh, nice.
And I see that, you know, there's amazing work going on in terms of connecting with especially things like strengths and values work. And so I would love to see that continue. And I think there's definitely, you know, from discussion in, you know, the way that things are moving in Singapore, there's been a real commitment to addressing mental health and bringing that into the conversation more. And so I guess it's now building on that.
Nice, yeah. So I think you tapped on it a little, right? Like what we can learn from each other. I think that's very powerful, right? So I would like to kind of understand, like, is there one thing that you hope that maybe local schools can learn from international schools when it comes to addressing well-being?
I think from what I see, there are so many powerful teachings that are going on in local schools that are really working in terms of performance. You only have to look at the PISA score, Singapore, you know, top of, you know, math, science, reading. So I would love to see that matched in terms of well-being. And that would be the thing that I mean, that's kind of the golden standard, I guess. And it's difficult because you know, a lot of people have the perception that you can only have one or the other. So I would love for that conversation about co-creating performance and well-being, and that being what thriving really is. And so that's something that I'm very hopeful that that's going to become more and more common conversation. And we do see that in terms of schools kind of inquiring at the School of Positive Psychology for work in that area.
Nice. Is there, maybe can you share some examples how that might look like? Because I think some of us may still trying to understand how will, you know, that might look like in a school setting.
I think it's difficult to pin down specifics because obviously different schools will have slightly different cultures and needs. But I think it would be also taking things like, I mean, I know that there's been a real shift into having counsellors and counselling conversations and early interventions happening to manage and cope with ill-being. And so it's having programs in place where every student is recognising their capacity to build on their well-being and their ability to thrive. And I guess if we think about it as almost like a seesaw, you know, the seesaw can be down on one side in terms of like ill-being. It can be in the middle where someone's not really doing poorly, they're not doing super well,
just in the middle.
They're that kind of languishing was the term that came around in COVID, right? It was everywhere. And that's, I think that's the point that we've got some really powerful opportunities. What do we do with those students who are in the
I was just thinking of that.
Right? So how do we really engage them? And so it's putting in place, it's getting really curious, it's asking questions of students in particular schools, having student voices that actually can help to inform practice, getting really curious and then seeing what works in that particular environment.
I think you tapped on children's voice. I think that's a very powerful thing to do as well. When we often instead of just asking our educators, what do you think we should do for the kids? Why not ask the kids themselves, right? Like, what do they need? Maybe you can share with us some examples of, or in your experience, right, where children's voice, just by listening to their perspective, have come up with maybe new strategies or some things that help with children's well-being.
Yeah, actually, in the last school that I worked at, before I sort of joined the School of Positive Psychology full time, we had a group of school leaders who were students, and hearing their voice of change, they were very much always included in new sort of initiatives that were student-centered. And one of the things that I think was really powerful was that students all had individual mentors in the last 2 years of school.
Nice.
And so that there were always teachers or adults who were in sort of a supportive role who could work with them to empower them to share their ideas. And what that meant is those who needed support could have support, but those who had kind of either were in that kind of sticky, messy middle of not quite working out where they needed to go, they had sort of strategies, and those who had the insight to see paths forward and possible areas of growth and progress were given that voice. So I think programs can be simple, and the simpler the better, because then they're sustainable. In the end, you want something that works and that can be sort of ongoing.
Definitely.
And so I loved seeing how students would advocate for their own well-being.
That's very powerful. Yeah. Okay, cool. I think now we have kind of understand what can local schools learn from international schools, right? I'd like to hear how about international schools, because I feel international schools are really focusing on well-being a lot, especially progressively. So what do you think for them in particular can help, or is the next step for them when it comes to looking into addressing well-being?
Yeah, it's really interesting. There's a group on Ireland called Coach Up.
Okay.
And they are looking at bringing coaching modalities into schools in Singapore, not just for international schools. At the moment, it's more in international schools, but anyone who's interested in coaching can be a part of that. And I think it's conversations like that. I mean, within the positive psychology area of study, positive psychology coaching is a really impactful tool to take into an organisation like an educational setting. And so that's something that I see is starting to grow. And there are some sort of real leading schools in Singapore that are working on bringing coaching and the use of psychology, positive psychology, into how they mentor students, or how they work with staff. So different schools are doing it in different ways. I think the other thing is having dedicated teams to really work on a holistic approach to well-being. So I think there's a danger that I see in terms of when we use the word well-being, it can often mean, well, we're just trying to deal with what's not going well, so we make children well. Okay. And again, that's a real lost opportunity. So having those individuals who can look at the whole spectrum of, from surviving to thriving, that whole range of different ways of supporting and elevating children, students there. I see that some schools are, doing a lot more in terms of running their own diagnostics, more informally, in-house, not for publishing, but having different surveys that they they have to really have a sense of, well, how is that, how are our practices working?
Yeah.
Do we need to make changes? How well are we understanding what's going on for our students? And so it's so much of it is about resources.
Yeah.
Time in particular.
Yeah, investment in time and energy, right?
Yeah.
I think you were sharing about coaching. Maybe you can expand about that. Like, how is it different from counseling? Like, what is coaching?
So counseling traditionally will be when someone has a clear problem that they want to have some support or advice in. And counselling's been a part of a school setting for many, many years. And so I think that's something that a lot of schools are quite comfortable with, having counsellors. We have a very big shortage of counsellors in Singapore, but also globally.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah. We are not meeting the demand.
Is it because of the rising cases or?
It's a combination of things. I think that's definitely a big contributor. So the counselling space, I think, is already very much established. Still needs to grow. But coaching really is about giving individuals agency to draw on their own ideas, their own strategies, know that they have the capability, building agency to take next steps.
Lovely.
So really about asking powerful questions,
reflecting.
Reflecting rather than just when something's going wrong. I need help. It might be, this is something I want to work towards. Let's have a conversation about how can we strategically take action to make it happen.
Nice.
And accountability.
Nice. Okay. Maybe I would like to hear your definition, right, of what is students' well-being in your definition in today's world, especially with this post-pandemic situation that's happening, right? So what is well-being, your definition of well-being?
I think it fluctuates. I see student well-being as students feeling comfortable and confident in their selves to do the things that they want to do, and to have the insight into themselves to know that they can grow. And I mean, that's something seemingly simple, but I think every student every child has the capacity to become,
the best version
I was going to say whatever they want to be. That might be just a little bit too inclusive, but to really grow into something amazing. And so I think that's a big part of that.
Okay, cool. So in your opinion, right, I think well-being is a big topic. It has different dimensions, right? What do you feel, or which dimension you feel needs to be more focused at the current current situations in Singapore?
I think what I see from conversations with educators and with young people, the idea of connection, belonging, forming relationships is something that there seems to be a real need for working with young people on strategies of how to do that. It's not helped by the way that social media and devices make it very comfortable for individuals, all of us, let's face it, all of us to sit in our own little world and not have to communicate with other people. And so it's I think that is a big thing. We're seeing more and more of the effect of that. And as you mentioned, post-COVID, that definitely we're still seeing. I think, educators are seeing the effects of that throughout, every level of student. So I think that's a big thing. People matter. It's a really important thing in terms of longevity, in terms of happiness, in terms of thriving.
All right. In your opinion, right? Because in a school setting, we always talk about teachers to contribute to maybe the children's well-being, etc. Right? Is there other players in the community or ecosystem, like parents, you feel like can use positive education practices to come in to support children?
Yeah, absolutely. The impact that a parent will have on their child is, so can't be appreciated or valued. And so one of the things that I see in some of the work that I do with parents is the light bulb moments of realizing how much they can do for their children and how much they can do for themselves to positively impact their relationship with their children. And so it might be, we all have our own experiences as we were growing up and our own family experiences. And no matter how good or bad they were, we all still have a lot to learn, right?
Yes.
And I think that's one of the things that I see from parents, just recognizing how when we know better, we can do better. And there's something so empowering in that. One of the things that I often suggest to parents is reading books on strengths, character strengths. Lee Waters has a great one on
is it Strength Switch?
Strength Switch, yes.
I love that book.
Exactly. And it's so simple. It's just a reframe, isn't it, on the way that you see what your children are doing. And so little tweaks like that. Getting used to in themselves, if they feel a difficult emotion, just noticing what do they do with that. And that can be really powerful in itself. When I get angry, what do I do? Oh, okay. Let me just notice a little bit more next time. And how does that show up when I'm having conversations with my children?
I think that's very important because, we're sharing about how parents or teachers, right, instead of focusing on the weaknesses, we look at their strengths as well. Because, sometimes there is going to be rough days. Right? Even for educators. But how do we prepare ourselves, right, to kind of cope with it and still kind of address children's well-being? I think, I feel everyone should read Strengths Switch. I think it's a very powerful tool.
And resilience is something that we build in retrospect from past experiences, but then we're also building that muscle to anticipate how we can be ready to take future challenges sort of in our stride.
Okay. So I think there's a common misconception about positive education where we are just here to promote positivity and kind of well-being, right? So how do you kind of want to address this misconception, right? How is positive education and well-being related? It's not just about promoting positivity, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it wasn't helped particularly because in early days, the research really was about trying to understand what the power of things like positive emotions were, because we didn't have research on it previously. But really, positive education, positive psychology is about how to use tools to be at your best. And whether that's going from, working through the most difficult situation and doing the best and being the most resourceful in that particular situation, or it's going from when you're feeling okay about things and you learn the skills and the strategies to really thrive and flourish there. So I think that misconception about positive education, positive psychology is just about skipping around and la-di-da-di-da and everything's, the idea of toxic positivity has kind of come more into the zeitgeist, and I think that's it's powerful to differentiate the two. All emotions are important. They all have a place. Even labeling them positive and negative, I think, is quite counterintuitive. And so really having that sense of that even though positive psychology started by looking at trying to understand the capacity for thriving, it's grown beyond that. And I guess that's why the idea of well-being science as a term is being used as well as positive psychology. So the two are often used together, positive psychology and well-being science.
Is
so
it's different, or is it?
They're just two terms that are often used or becoming more and more popular in use. So I think that's it. Just understanding it's the whole experience.
Nice. So it's like in your perspective, right? Like, what will be a thriving school look like? If you can, like, maybe down the road in like 10-20 years, if you want to achieve that, right, how will that look like?
I think it's a really interesting question, because I think there's the temptation to paint it as something that is, it is just all
ideal world, right?
people skipping and singing and smiley faces. But I think it's much more than that. I think that thriving school has a culture that's been developed where all of the people who are invested in that school, the school leadership team, the teachers, all of the staff, not just the educational staff, the students, the parents, the other people who are in different ways connected to that school, they're speaking a similar language in terms of what they value. And it's a value that includes but goes beyond just where a school ends up in the ratings, and the scores that students get at the end of their schooling journey. It understands that we are part of an ecosystem that's bigger than just an individual school. And we are all here on this planet contributing to it and taking that responsibility for doing that in a positive way.
Wow, you put it in a very lovely way.
Big ideas, maybe lofty goals, but I think it's possible. And there are some schools out there who are really making great moves to embracing those values and practices.
So, like you were sharing, like, this is like a very big picture and eventually the ideal world, right? But if there's just one small step that you hope to encourage everyone to do that can help to, maybe it's the first step to achieve that thriving school state, what would that be?
One step. Do you know what I think? The thing that would make the most difference to start with, it's probably not going to be something you expect, but learning to listen. I think as a society, we move at such a pace that we've stopped listening to ourselves. We've stopped listening to each other. We have conversations where our minds are already how many sentences ahead, just waiting for the moment to say what we want to say. We are here so much of the time rather than here. And I think that practice, which again, active listening is a big part of some of the studies in understanding positive relationships and healthy relationships. So I think that would be a really significant starting point. Actually teaching people how to listen effectively. And it is a skill that can be taught, but is often not thought about or undervalued.
I think it's for both the students as well as the teachers, right? How can they listen, like active listening? That's really nice that you brought that up. Okay, so I think this is my last question to you. What would you want to say to our viewers who are like educators, schools, and organizations who work with children, right? What would you want to encourage them to do to kind of, apart from active listening, right, that they can actually do to actually prioritize children well-being in their organization?
What I would hope for is not for people to do more, but do do things that they know help them feel a sense of groundedness.
Mhm.
They learn about themselves, how to their own sort of energetic state, whether it's when they're feeling anxious and how to calm, or when they're feeling sort of lower in energy, how to elevate that. I would encourage individuals to do the work on themselves, because there's nothing like knowing the power of wellbeing practices in yourself to then take it into groups, into classes, into meetings with colleagues, into parent meetings. And so I hope for others that they can find things that work, strategies that work for them.
I think it's very salient that you brought that point up, because like a lot of times when we were younger, right, we didn't have that opportunity, right, to kind of reflect about on ourselves, etc. So sometimes when we talk about this, it seems very foreign to individuals, even our educators. You're like, oh, why are we talking about this? So I would say it's like a more of a cultural shift, right? But I just want to hear your point of view, right? Who do you feel can influence this change? Like, is it the leaders? Is it the partners, the teachers? Is it who do you think?
I think it can happen from a number of different directions. You know, I mean, the power of having PM Wong talk about mental health as a priority, that is really significant. That's a big step forward, and empowers growth in all sorts of organizations, including schools. Then I think everybody has a responsibility. It has to happen in sort of all pockets of a school, for example. And if it's one person sort of trying to sail the ship in one direction and they've got great ideas and the best of intentions, but everyone else is just kind of sitting back and letting them do it and not taking that responsibility, I think that's
agreed.
The journey is going to be very slow. So, but it's working out how to help others feel empowered and engaged by it, rather than feel like it's just another thing to do on their very long list of time consuming. Teachers have a very difficult role and long hours and stuff. So it's working out how to make it work for them.
All right. Thanks for sharing that as well, because I think that's definitely very powerful. Thank you so much for having this lovely and I would say inspiring conversation as well. I definitely, and like as Forte360, we always will promote positive education as like a whole school approach as well. So thank you so much for being part of the conversation.
Absolutely, been a joy. Thank you for having me, and for my little smiley pillow.
Thank you.